With all the stuff I've been doing this week, I just have not been able to record the videos in a timely manner, so I apologize for that. If you're watching this later on, you didn't notice, so it's cool. I understand. Uh, Welcome. Um, I've been showing a lot of videos from places. Oh, hi, Emily. How are you? And I've been showing some raw data, as I call it, where I just go to places and I view them and I kind of talk to folks about it. And I try to figure out what's going on. And so on my birthday, I went out to some shopping malls and stuff, and I noticed something. Retail is dying. And this isn't a new subject. A lot of people have been talking about this to me. I think the most interesting one was when I took a picture of some Christmas ornaments at a mall, and a friend of mine pointed out that it was empty. The shopping mall was empty. Now I could make some comments that this was a weird part of the mall, and there was people there, but for what it was very very empty, especially since it was near Christmas. It should have been jam packed, and it wasn't. Well, on my birthday, I went out and I went to a comic shop I had heard about, and I was really looking forward to seeing it. And as I was driving to it, I noticed that almost every store I was looking at was empty. Every storefront. This entire place was empty. I didn't actually need to pull over. I just stopped my car and just took the picture. And, I was just so amazed by this. And I was asking questions like, what is going on? Why is this so difficult to do? And I've come up with some answers for you to see. And that's what we're going to talk about this week. Well, first off, we have easier delivery. You don't need to go to a shop anymore to find the right product. You can find it on Amazon, you can find it on eBay, and you can find it for a price that you can afford. Well, with that, you don't need the store anymore. Let's take it an even further route. Back in the day, to get from point A to point B, you had about 100 miles of gas in your car, and then you would have to pull over and you would have to get more gas. And there were people that could do highway robbery where they could, charge 5 times as much for gas. And, they charge 35 cents for a gallon of gas. And this is actually from a real story of a guy in California. And he would charge 35 cents when it was like 7 cents everywhere else. And everybody who saw this was just like, wow, this guy's a jerk. Today, 35 cents is amazing, but, back then that was pretty awful. But you only had 100 miles. You only had, so much distance that you could go. And then you would have to pull over. There would be a gas station. And you know what? There were, some touristy things to go see. And while you're there, there might be a place to eat. There might be something to go do. And that place becomes a stop. So from Spokane, the midway point from Spokane to Seattle is a place called Ellensburg, and Ellensburg has a specific place just for people who are filling up with gas. And all the towns in between used to be those same places, and now they're not. I could show you pictures of towns that used to be major bubbling metropolises. I mean, not the size of Seattle or New York or anything, but they were major ports for the road. And now almost all of the trucks, the cars, everything don't need them anymore. They don't need to move, every 100 miles. They've got 200-300 miles they can go in their car before they need to fill up. And that means that all these towns that were built because of those gas stations aren't there anymore. They're not needed. And that means it's just not working. And then, when you go into a mall and you have this idea where you can... Well, let's go back to the slide. And, it used to be that when you went into a shopping mall, you were kind of there to have the experience of it. And you wanted to really understand it. And I'm showing this picture of the Polynesian Cultural Center. And this is a place that, I lived very close to. In fact, if you really want to know, my university used to be right behind this tourist stop, and I would literally walk behind it to get to my house. And there would be a gate right there next to the Pacific Theater, so I knew what time it was based on the songs they were singing in the Pacific Theater. And we would actually check our time, our watches, based on things going on in Tonga or in Tahiti. If we heard certain drum beats, we knew what time it was. And that doesn't mean anything to you, but if your first time into this area was, or if you came here for the first time, you would have this amazing experience. Look at this design. It's designed to be like a video game. They've got these little rounded areas, and they've got these, kind of the weenies, so that it doesn't matter where you are, you always feel like you're in this new place. And by the way, that island in the middle, that's the Easter Islands, and they've got little moa heads going there, and it's a really cool place. And they really want you to feel like you're traveling to a different island as you travel around. But the reality is, if you come here a couple more times, you get used to it. You already know where Fiji is. You already know Aotearoa. You already know Samoa. You already know Hawaii. You know these places. You know the act they're going to do. It doesn't change very much. Like I said, we check our watches based on the acts we hear. So it doesn't become this hyper reality. After a while, it starts to wear off, and it just becomes this normal thing. It goes into reflex mode for us. So if you were to come here for a third time, it wouldn't be as great. And this is a real problem for the Polynesian Cultural Center, because they are a major tourist resort or a major tourist place, and they don't have a lot of frequent second time or third time visitors. First time is great, but by the third time, you're just like, okay. And you need to kind of accept this. When you go into a shopping mall, that feeling isn't there anymore because you're there all the time, and they don't have that feeling of awe anymore. You don't feel like it has the reality that it's trying to portray anymore. And with the coming of things like Amazon and eBay, the hyperreality isn't needed or doesn't work anymore. And you don't want to go to the shopping mall. Why go to a shopping mall? Why spend 45 minutes to get to a shopping mall and spend all day long finding clothes when you could just go to Amazon and it'll take you all of 5 minutes? And that is really, really hurting a lot of industries. Well, this is... Sorry, my throat is really bad today. Well, our civilization is based on a system of walls and rules, and these two walls are pretty famous. And they did the exact same thing. They were to keep the line between the civilized and the uncivilized. The one on the left is called Hadrian's Wall, though it wasn't made by Hadrian. It was actually made before he came to the area. It designates the difference between Britannia and the Scotsmen. And the Scottish are quite proud of the wall. The English are constantly talking about it as tourists, and as you can see, nobody cares. And then there's people just who live there and are like, yeah, it's a wall. Much of Europe has walls all over it, built by the Romans, and they're having to tear down the walls to rebuild their own walls, because the Romans were 2,000 years ago, were well over 1,000 years ago when they fell, but their walls are still there. In fact, to get into Rome, you had to have specific stamps on your card to get into the area. And they said that they had walls all around Germania, but they didn't. They just had these kind of posting areas where you would have to go through the post and get the stamp to say that you were in Rome proper. But the reality is the Germans completely ignored this and went around and learned to forge really easily. It wasn't difficult. And that's one of those hilarious things. That sounds familiar to you, I'm sure. And then the same thing happened with the wall to your right. That is a picture of the Chinese Wall, the Great Wall of China. They specifically built it to keep out the outsiders, the uncivilized, the people who would invade. And the wall itself wasn't so much to keep them out. It was to warn everybody that something was coming. So if somebody came through On that tower right there, he would light a lantern, and immediately all the lanterns would be lit, and immediately and very quickly the emperor would know, and all the armies could immediately move in before anybody could really do any damage. And that was the point of the wall. This same idea is where our minds go to when we think of civilization. We think of Rome, we think of China, we think of, these great places, and when you look at it, you can see these walls and these rules. I'm not showing the picture of Hadrian's, not Hadrian's. The original walls and rulers were in the Mesopotamia, and they would literally write the rules on the walls so that people knew what the rules were. And the walls were important. They kept out invaders. And so the entire system here that you are looking at is entirely designed by civilization, where they build walls and they make rules. And when a group becomes so compact, they begin to make more walls and more rules. I want you to go back to the picture here. There is no wall, but you know that there is a difference between Tonga and Tahiti, and there's almost a feeling of a wall right there. And there is most definitely a difference between Aotearoa. They actually built a wall around it. It's made of long sticks, and it's a pretty cool place. But they made the wall so that it feels like you're going to a different place. In the same way, a shopping mall, when you walk through it, is okay. This is the video game area. This is the shoe land. This area over here is candy, and then you go in, and this is the reptile store. And yes, there were reptile stores back in the day, and so they had the same walls and they had the same rules, and they had a lot of rule systems. Many of the shopping malls I've gone into, the reason why they're failing is they don't like the youth. There was a shopping mall when I was a kid, or not a kid, when I was a teen, and it was really close to my high school, walking distance. And whenever we went in, we'd be there, and if I had money, I'd spend it. But a lot of the people there didn't like us. They were like, "Oh, you're not the customers we want." And so, they kind of treated us badly, really badly. They would call the cops, they would do all this stuff. Eventually, we couldn't go there anymore, and all of these businesses went under. The mall fell because they wouldn't let people in. They had built their own walls. And civilization as we know it is nothing but walls and rules. And that's how we work it. Look at this modern Chinese house. You have a room for the bathroom. Totally understandable. You have a bedroom. You have a living room. You have a kitchen. You have an eating area. You'll notice there aren't walls, but you can sense them there. The walls are in your mind. And that's the same way they've built everything. In your mind, there are walls and there are rules to follow because of these walls. And the same thing, when Rome ruled, they made walls. This wall represented the line between, the citizens and the plebeians, or those people. And then from the non-citizens to the slaves, and from the slaves to the even lower slaves. And then they finally got to the immigration slaves, and those were awful people. And if you came in and you claimed to be great and important because you were from Mesopotamia, they'd be like, "You're in Rome, and Romans rule over all who are foreign." Oh, this is not how we do it. And the same thing in China. If you're not Chinese, you are less. Same thing happens in Japan. The same thing happens in several countries, in many countries. And we have to realize these were major countries. And so civilization as we know it are the ones who build these walls and rules. And all of these retail stores and all of these places that you're looking at have this concept in their minds. They have built an area where you will go shopping. And in these shops are different lands that you can go to. Well, if we don't need that anymore, what good are they? And that brings up the other civilization. This is another shot of the Polynesian Cultural Center. And yes, it's kind of decorative and they're doing a little tour, but it also has an accuracy you don't think about. The boat and that thing and the phone are the same thing in this mode. You see, the Polynesians could travel thousands of miles without seeing land and know where they were going. We don't understand how they did it, even today, but they could. They traveled all the way from the Americas to New Zealand and even into Australia. We don't understand how they did it. We know they did it, but we don't understand how they did it. But we don't understand because in our minds this is an uncivilized group, and yet they could do it. They could do it easily. And they could travel back and forth, and trade was a major thing. And because of this, they had a very different civilization from the way we understand it. And eventually something happened and they couldn't travel as much. I don't know what it was. There's a lot of theories running around, but none of them have really had any conclusive evidence. But we do know that around the 15th century, they stopped. And they just kind of stopped traveling as much. And they started to build up where they lived. And as they did this, they started to build up walls and rules where they lived. And eventually, when Europeans arrived and saw the civilizations, it was very different from the way they were even 500 years or even 200 years beforehand. And as things changed, they started to, adapt to the European idea of civilization. Then around the 1970s, something weird happened. They started to expand again. And it wasn't just the Polynesians. It was all of the Pacific Islanders. It wasn't just Pacific Islanders. It was the Chinese. It was all of the groups that had this other civilization background in it started to expand again. And at that same time, much as we know it of civilization began to crumble. And we started to have computers and the internet started to be introduced. And then, as we've watched these groups expand and change in a more rapid pace, we've had things like phones introduced where we could order information on it. And with that understanding, we can see that this other civilization is starting to take over. In the next video, we're going to talk about online civilization and how it works within the other civilization. And I'm going to probably use Minecraft because it's fairly benign. It's a video game, and it represents everything pretty well. So we're going to go into that into the next video. I'm very likely going to record it today or tomorrow. And then after that, we're going to talk about the transition area that we're in. We're transitioning from the civilization that we understand into the other civilization, and what we need to look for, and what is moving and doing things. So I'll see you all in the next video, and catch you all later. Bye.